Good afternoon. We're about now to deal with the commentary on Ezekiel. Ezekiel was the son of Buzi, who was a Zadokite priest. And Ezekiel was all probability in training for, or was in the priesthood. Now, he was part of the company. We had seen with Daniel that Daniel went into captivity as hostage with the royal hostages from 605 BCE. But from 598 BCE, it appears that the captives included Ezekiel and those that survived the march to Babylonia were taken and placed in captivity by the Canal Kibar at Tel Aviv, that's Tel Aviv, the hill of the storm god. Now, and the Jewish community eked out a living there on the Euphrates, than that canal, which went from one part to the other of the river, where the Jewish community eked out its existence. And unlike his contemporary Jeremiah, he was married, but little else is recorded of him. In 594 BC, he was called to be a prophet and given the vision that came in the form of a great cloud from the north, as we see from 1:4. In this text, in chapters 1 to 24, we see Ezekiel prophesy at the direction of God, and directed those prophecies primarily at the sins of Jerusalem as a bloody city. And these prophecies are quite important. And the work is probably directed to the rebellious house, ruled over by Zedekiah and those who remained in Jerusalem. However, much of Ezekiel's work and prophecy deals with future events and is badly understood by modern scholarship, especially now at the end of days. Harmonising the prophecies of Daniel, F02713, shows the importance of Ezekiel and Daniel, particularly over the 20th and 21st centuries. There is a break in the prophecies and concentrating on the 20th to the 21st centuries, and they are most important in understanding what's happening. And you'll see how all those prophecies are tied together with Habakkuk also, F035, Haggai, F037, the sign of Jonah and the history of the reconstruction of the temple, number 013, and the completion of the sign of Jonah, number 013b. And during these prophecies, Ezekiel's wife died, and he used that loss to drive a major spiritual message to the people, as we see from 24:15 to 24. In the sequence of Ezekiel, we are given a prophecy of the establishment of the church in the last days for the restoration at the coming of the Messiah. And that's covered in the paper Fire from Heaven, number 028. That work shows and ties in with Jeremiah chapter 4, verses 15 to 27, concerning the warning of the last days and concerning the formation of the church, which is formed out of Dan Ephraim and comes from the south into the north and spreads right throughout the world, before and at the coming of the Messiah and through the restoration to the millennium. At the millennium, the entire world will be part of that religious system. There will only be one church, one faith, one baptism. It will keep the Sabbaths and the new moons, as we see from Isaiah chapter 66, verses 23 and 24, where they will keep the new moons and they keep the calendar from one new moon to the next and from one Sabbath to the next. Now, also, Ezekiel was important in understanding the time sequence through from the prophecy of Pharaoh's broken arms, which is covered in number 036, and that ties the prophecy of Pharaoh's broken arms into the last days through to the 20th century and the 2,520 years of the 7 times that we see from the book of Daniel, and that period brings the prophecy of Pharaoh's broken arms into 2 periods of 40 years, from 1916 through to 1996-97. And 1997 begins the final phase of the mourning for Moses and the empire of the beast of the 10 toes of Daniel chapter 2, in the lowest phase, the last phase of the feet of miry clay with the 10 toes. And those 10 toes are tied in to this prophecy of Pharaoh's broken arms, number 036, underlined 2, which is the wars of the last days in that sequence. It's important in understanding what Ezekiel's saying. His prophecies, God's prophecies through Ezekiel, are critical to the faith. Now, in the commentary on Ezekiel from parts 9, 10, 11 and 12, we see that the temple in the last days is described. Bullinger has the layout, the plan of the temple, in his Appendix 88. But Bullinger makes a lot of mistakes in terms of the timings because of the errors in 19th century biblical history and their understanding of the time sequence of those time frames in which these things occurred. Now, the actual time frames of the years involved are dealt with in reading the law with Ezra and Nehemiah, and the biblical calendar is put into place with those, and under the outline timetable of the age, number 272. They will be dealt with at another time, but they are important in your understanding of what's happening. Now, this preparation of the temple was detailed, and you'll see with Ezekiel the whole structure of the temple is explicitly laid out, and that at the return of the Messiah the temple will be rebuilt by Messiah and the host, that is the elect, and the resurrected of the first resurrection, and they will build the temple over the first jubilee of the millennial system. So it's important that we understand that all of this is tied in prophecy to Ezekiel, and Ezekiel complements Jeremiah and Daniel, fits together with them and the other later prophets, and all of this is in a great sequence of prophecy through the apostles, through to the book of Revelation, and the outline God gave us in the last days through Revelation for the restoration of the system and the coming of the Messiah and the establishment of the 1,000-year reign for the millennium on this planet. Nobody's going anywhere. Nothing's happening to this planet. And the only people who will be going somewhere were the people who will not obey the laws of God and the calendar of the temple system emanating from the laws of God. Nobody's going to heaven, nobody's getting raptured, and nobody's going anywhere. And the people who teach that will be dead by the millennial system. It's important that we all understand that Ezekiel must interact and does interact with Isaiah, Jeremiah, and the later prophets, Daniel and all of the prophets from Hosea through to Malachi. I think it's important that we understand and look at the 12 parts and study them very carefully, and to understand the prophets, the prophecies of God through Ezekiel and how they fit into the last days and what's expected of us. There is no doubt that Jerusalem was condemned because of its failure to keep the laws of God and the temple calendar properly and keep the holy days and Sabbaths, the new moons, properly. And so is the case that we see from the Psalms and Isaiah and from the structure in Jeremiah and in Daniel and in the later prophets and through the apostles, and on it goes. They just will not do what they're told, and Israel wouldn't do what it's told and will not do what it's told now. And that's why all these things will come to pass, and these wars now will be upon us and will not leave until Messiah is here and we are placed in captivity.